and 39 of the Multifamily Collective, where it is my mission to tease out human potential in the multifamily space. And I'm your host, Mike Brewer, and I have a very special guest with us today. He is known as the Water Guy, which we will get into, but his name is Paul Marks. Paul serves as the National Director of Strategic Accounts for eConserve. He also hosts a world famous, I'm going to call it a world famous radio show where he is the host and the producer. The radio show is known as Multifamily Matters, and he has celebrities and rock stars on there every single week. We will make sure to link up in the show notes. So you have links to the Multifamily Matters show. It is definitely worth checking out. It is Paul and his guests drop value there every single week, things that are actionable. He is very good about making his guests tell stories that are applicable to the things you do on a daily basis. So definitely tune into that at some point. So, Paul, welcome to the show.
Mike, thank you so much. It's so interesting for me to be on the other side of the microphone for once. I appreciate you having me.
And I definitely do appreciate you coming on. And I thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. I think 3 times now. It's just a blast. I will tell you, the in-person version of it is my favorite version, right. But obviously COVID has impacted that in some way. But well, let's dive in, Paul. Paul, our mission at Multifamily Collective is to really tease out human potential, as spoken in the lead-in. But before we get to that, I want to know how you became known as the Water Guy.
Well, it's to me, it's an interesting story, and it not totally original on my part, but I've been providing water conservation solutions to the multifamily industry for over 18 years now. And typically it'll save 40 to 60% of a multifamily asset's water and sewer expense on an annual basis. I had a client, I'm headquartered in Houston, Texas. I had a client in Houston, Texas who owned about 11 properties here. And he had a problem that didn't relate to what I did, but he called me on the phone and he said, I need your help. I need to find a solution. And I told him, I said, look, Peter, this is something that you need, but we don't do that. That's not my area. He goes, yeah, but it's water and you're the water guy. So, I decided to adopt that. I thought that was very original on his part. So I've been known for the water guy. As a matter of fact, yesterday I got a call from a company to have them help me. They wanted my help in finding something on a property or an asset in North Carolina. And so I've been spending my time just trying to resource people I know in the industry to see if what they want can be done. And it has nothing to do with what I provide, but I'm the water guy, so I do that.
I love it. Thank you for telling that. And doesn't it really speak to the idea that those individuals in the multifamily space, and I'm sure this is true across all industries, but those individuals who become known as the people who can provide solutions and or solve problems are really the ones that are of high value in their industries, in their spaces. And goes to the point of, if you want to accelerate the pace of your career, look around for the problems and then be the solution person, right? Go put the solutions in place. So, Paul, you host, and I literally mean that. I think your show, you have a diverse set of people that come on the show. But can you talk to us about the origin of Multifamily Matters? It's interesting that you're the water guy, but you also host a radio show.
Well, yeah, no, it is kind of unusual, but it really is something that I decided to do to fill a need that I saw was there. For clarification purposes, for your viewers, Multifamily Matters is a radio show. It is actually broadcast over the radio. There are a lot of podcasts that are out there. There's just like what we're doing today, but this is actually broadcast once a week. It's a weekly radio show. It's an hour long, and it is solely dedicated to multifamily industry operations. And that's what kind of differentiates what I do from a lot of the podcasts that I see out there where people are trying to get investors and try and find people to invest in properties. There's plenty of those out there. But to me, there was a need, and we're in our 4th year now of doing this once a week, every week. I have a background growing up. My father founded an advertising agency that was very successful here in Houston, Texas, in 1940. And so I grew up in the advertising business. And from that, I would go to radio stations, television stations with him to do certain things that he would do over the years. So I never was intimidated by that. And I saw that there was a need to talk about multifamily operations. And so I had the idea, I kind of mulled it over for about a year, and then I just jumped in and made the decision to do it. I've been shocked at the reception that we've got. I mean, you said world famous, that's pushing it a little bit, but I'm shocked that we're doing a radio station in Houston, Texas, and I get emails from people in the multifamily industry in Canada saying how much they enjoyed listening to the show. And even you originally reached out to me and being in Atlanta, and it's broadcast in Houston, but you could listen to it on any device from anywhere in the world while it's being broadcast or on iHeartRadio. And then, of course, it serves as a podcast because on our website, we have every episode archived that someone can go back and listen to. So, yeah, it was a need that I saw for the industry to bring something to the people on the operations side.
Well, I will tell you, having been a guest and certainly a consumer of the show, and I was telling Janet, I know you interviewed us yesterday for your show, but I told Janet Paul has a real expertise in making you feel comfortable. There was a little bit of a concern, first time on a radio show, what to expect, but you have really turned it into an art form in terms of making the guests feel comfortable, asking great questions, teasing out the stories that really back up those lessons that you're trying to give to your audience. I just think you do a tremendous job, and I really thank you for serving. Actually, just having the courage to serve that niche. It's very, very cool.
Well, thank you.
Well, let's say 4.5 years plus minus of episodes weekly, my imagination tells me that you've sort of discerned some big themes over the years that have come out of those interviews. Can you speak to our audience about some of those things that you've learned over the last 4.5 years?
Oh, wow. It's hard to get over the last year. I mean,
sure.
I remember, for the first 3 years that we were doing the show, we had a different kind of topic every week. But in the last year, it's all basically either been about or touched on the pandemic and how people are operating during the pandemic, how their operations have been affected. Some of the big themes that I have seen come through, and we talked about it prior to the pandemic, but I think this is where conversations are going to be going, is exactly what we learned from the pandemic when it comes to technology, and how that is going to change, how what we were forced to do during the pandemic is going to change the way we work in the future in multifamily. Virtual touring. I mean, I don't need to tell you about all this, but obviously virtual touring and how it affects the marketing and leasing. Another topic that we've that we've discussed a couple of times and touched on a couple of times has been about 5G and how that is going to affect the industry, and that there is a concern amongst some folks that 5G doesn't penetrate walls and windows. And I'm not an expert on 5G, but this is what my guests have said. And basically it could cause a problem because the residents are going to demand connectivity, and the owners of the assets are going to have to decide if they're going to invest in the repeaters or the devices that help create that connectivity. But the flip side to that is there's an opportunity to make it an amenity to the property that you can actually generate revenue from.
Right.
So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because if everything changes to 5G, people are going to have to deal with that.
That's right. And I think for the longest time, 5G was a marketing. It was really more marketing than it was real world application. But I think, to speak to your point with COVID, there's been an accelerated pace of all these technologies. And so we're coming to this crescendo moment where consumer demand is going to force
Yeah.
owners. COVID is forcing owners, and where you're going to have to figure that out fairly rapidly because people will expect it. And it would be a disadvantage to you if you don't have it.
Right.
So I agree. Those are major themes. I think another theme that might be born out of that might be an interesting topic to discuss at a later date is the mental health impact that COVID has had. From the site level to the corporate level to certainly our business partners and our investors, it's taken a toll on everyone. That'll be a topic we should talk about at some point. But how about memorable guests or people that just really stick out in your mind for either delivering the value or just great characters or great people to interview?
I'll tell you, a few come to mind. I'm assuming you're saying besides yourself.
Oh,
since you've been on a few times.
I would not say that.
but I would tell you that one of the most memorable guests I had, it really was kind of a strange situation, was, in the first part of, as you know, our show is in 4 segments. That take up the hour. And in the first segment, we got through the first segment and we took a break for the commercials, and we started taping the second segment, and I could hear a door open and close on the other end. They were calling in on the phone, and she had started having a conversation with a gentleman that I could hear, and the engineer in the radio station is kind of holding his hands up. What's going on? And all of a sudden she said, "Excuse me, but I cannot do this anymore. Our legal department just said that I'm not cleared to discuss anything." And it wasn't like we were doing a 60 minutes expose. We were just talking about a topic. And you would think that someone would clear that before they agreed to be a guest. But we ended up having to stop right there and then scramble to get another guest to finish up the show the next day. So that was a memorable situation. I wouldn't say it was a great guest, but I can tell you that two shows that we did really stick out in my mind. A third now because of the one we just did. But to me, that when we're dealing with things that have a social impact on our industry, we did a show on domestic violence and how it affects the multifamily industry as far as the residents who may be victims of domestic violence, how to train your on-site teams to be able to recognize that, to go get help, how to approach someone who may be a victim to try and get them help. And this whole thing was done by someone who you may very well know in the industry, was Wendy Drucker of Drucker and Falk. Yes. And Wendy had kind of an initiative. She started a challenge for the industry to get involved. And we had her on the show to talk about it, and also had someone on the show with her who was from a shelter that helped victims of domestic violence. That was one. The second one was a show that we did on diversity inclusion early on, before everything that's happened in the last year. And that was with Stephanie Anderson, who was at the time with the National Apartment Association.
Right.
Obviously, you and Janet and your organization were on yesterday for a show that'll be aired this coming Saturday to talk about diversity inclusion, your personal journey, your company's personal journey with diversity inclusion. I think shows like that have a social impact that it really affect the industry are very, very important. And to me, they're memorable. And then on the last thing I will tell you is I had a show, obviously being headquartered in Houston, being active over the years in the local Houston Apartment Association. There are these industry icons. And I actually had 3 legends on the show at one time. Sue Ann Tinsley, who's active in the industry with Day Rise Residential, Jerry Winograd, who is with Judwin Properties, and Eileen Sabinski, who at the time was retired. I think she's come out of retirement now. All 3 were past presidents of the Houston Apartment Association, as well as members of the Hall of Fame, just to get them together in a room in the studio and have them tell stories about how they started in the industry and got to where they are, I think was a great lesson for people who want to move forward in the industry. So those were memorable moments.
I love you sharing that. It just brought to mind for me that the future of this industry is really built on people who are willing to share like that on or in venues like the one that you, or platforms like the one that you've created. And it's that knowledge base. It's like there's this team of individuals who have sort of built modern day property management as we knew it, but then there is this youthful generation that has come right along, and they're sort of entering that, kind of call it the teenage years or their early 20s, if we're thinking about the path of growing up, and they're ready, right? They're prepared. They have the want to become leaders in the multifamily space. And I just love it when we have people of great wisdom who grew up in this business, willing to share and put the lessons out there that they learned, so that those that are coming up behind can maybe not make the same mistakes
Yes.
that they did. So, you mentioned, I was going to ask a question about what you see coming or impacting the multifamily space in the next 36 months, but I think we hit on three big ones. You mentioned podcasts. I'm going to skip that question. I'm going to talk over the past 18 months. I've seen this sort of just explosion of multifamily podcasts that have come onto the scene. And I have to believe in my heart of hearts that you have sort of blazed a trail. You're obviously very good at what you do. There is an art as well as a science to this, in terms of being an interviewer and really teasing out stories from people. What kind of advice would you give to maybe some of our viewers or listeners that are making their way into the podcast space, which I'm likening to the radio space in some ways?
That's a great question. And I can tell you that my advice would be, you need to know who your listeners are. You need to understand who you're trying to reach. And then when you design a show, design it so that it's going to be of interest to them. That's the way you would grow your listenership or your viewership if it's a video podcast. In my case, for the radio show, I have a subscribers list of people who receive a weekly email from us that drives them to listen to the show from the standpoint of announcing what the topic is and who the guests are. So if the topic strikes somebody, they'll say, hey, I want to listen to that. Or if they know the guest or have heard of that guest, or they think it would be an interesting show, they're going to listen to it. That's how I drive listeners to the show, to the radio show. And that list is now, it's been growing organically for the last 4 years, but it's now about 35,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And it's all over North America. To me, that's the advice is have a show, know your listeners, just don't talk for the sake of talking.
Right.
And one other thing I'll say, and this is kudos to you and other people. Just listen and ask questions. Nobody wants to hear the host, just talk about things. They want to hear the guests. So to me, and I got to tell you this, 4+ years or 3+ years in my 4th year of doing this, with a weekly 1-hour radio show, I don't know if there's such a thing as a PhD in multifamily, but I think I'm getting pretty close to getting it. I'm just spending an hour with people like yourself and these experts in the industry from all different parts of the country. To me, I've gotten the greatest education I think that anybody could get, and I continue to. So that would be my advice.
I love that, and I appreciate you sharing that. And if I were being fully candid here, part and parcel of the reason I want to introduce interviewing into the Multifamily Collective platform is for that reason, right? I'd like to just glean the wisdom of all of these superstars that have come along before me or will come along after me. And I just think that there is so much learning out there to do, and what a great way to do it. So thank you so much for sharing that. kind of to bring to kind of a close, I have this interesting thing that I like to do, or I'm at least trying it out, is something I call start, stop, and keep. And I like it from a personal or professional perspective. And really the idea is to do something professionally, or to start doing something, stop doing something, or keep doing something personally, professionally over the next 12 months. And so I'm interested if you're willing to answer what will you start doing, or what will you stop doing, and what will you keep doing over the next 12 months, either personally or professionally?
Well, I'm gonna, since we've been talking about what the radio show is about, I'll put it in the context of the radio show.
Perfect.
What I'm going to start doing, I just mentioned that we have a 35,000 individual subscribers to our emails. I'm going to, and that was an organic type of growth. I'm going to start being more aggressive about growing that list, because I think that if I can get the message of what we're doing out to more people, it's going to create a greater listenership, and it's going to make for a better show because they'll have more exposure to more guests and so forth. So that's what I'm going to start doing. Probably what I'm going to stop doing is stop thinking that just because we've done a show on a similar topic, I don't want to do another one, because I'm not the listener and I don't know who was listening to the show the first time, or a similar topic the first time. And every guest has a different perspective. So even though in the past, I've tried to not repeat similar topics, but I think that that's something that I should stop doing and let the guests again carry the show from that standpoint. And then the thing that I'm going to keep doing is I'm just going to keep learning. I'm going to keep learning from what we do and the great opportunities I have to sit for an hour in person or on the phone every week with somebody in the industry who can not only educate me, but educate our listeners on their expertise, whether they're an industry icon, or they're a supplier partner, or they're at the property management level, or whatever it might be. Everybody can learn. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. I hope that answered your question.
It absolutely does. And I really want to thank you for playing along.
No problem.
And I do want to take just a second before I ask you to share with our audience where they can find you online and any closing statement. I do want to acknowledge that you are a true artisan, and I really do appreciate, just personally, maybe a little bit selfishly, what you do for the industry in terms of providing what I believe to be the best education that you can get. And that is listening to the stories that you tease out from the participants. And it's interesting. I've at times felt a little intimidated by, I know Paul is going to ask the story question, so I better have the story, and it better be a good one, and it better be true. So, but I think that's where the real learning comes from, is when people can sort of put themselves in your shoes, right, by way of the story that you're telling, and then they can make real application of the lessons that are embedded in those stories. So you're an artisan, and I really truly appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say, when it comes to the stories, the reason I always ask for those is because I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten from people that will say, when that person told the story, I had the same problem at my property. And so people learn, like, as you said, they put themselves into the story and say, how would I handle that if that happened to me? So that's why I do
it. It's wonderful and beautiful, and I'm glad you're going to keep doing that.
Yes.
Well, tell our viewers where they can find you online, if they have questions, and then any parting statement that you would like to make to the audience or the listeners.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. That's obviously a way to find me, at Paul Marks on LinkedIn. But also, if someone wanted to reach out to me to talk about the radio show, or if they need help with water conservation, you can always reach me at our website for the radio show at multifamilyradio.com. And the show is named Multifamily Matters, but our website handle is multifamilyradio.com. And there's a place to contact us there. Just shoot me an email, and I'll get back with you to talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. And the only closing comments I would have, I guess, is thank you for having me on. And it's wonderful to be interviewed as opposed to being the interviewer. You did a great job, by the way, and
Thank you.
I think you'll be very successful in doing this. And certainly, I'd love to have you back on the show again, and especially talk about the topic you mentioned about the mental health and how that's going to affect people. I think that's a very important topic.
Definitely. Well, Paul, thank you very much for taking time out of your, I'm sure, busy day to do this. And we'll look forward to future episodes of Multifamily Matters and Multifamily Collective, because I'm sure we'll have you back on at some point.
That's great.
Take care.
All right. Thank you, Mike.